Okay, please join me in welcoming Dr. Emily Yap for the WREN welcome, followed by remarks from Dr. Tamantha Stutchbury and Professor Danielle Scorpieta. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Yagane. So firstly, I would like to also acknowledge the traditional owners of the Dharawal lands on which we gather here today and pay my respects to the elders past and present. I am very excited for this event today and for all of us attending as well. You know, we first came across Kate and her book through our networks at the University of Newcastle, and I thought it would be such an amazing opportunity if we could bring Kate in and share her insights with us. So thank you, Kate, first of all, for traveling all the way to Wollongong. You know, you actually had to fly in and take the train in and all that. So we really also hope you enjoy your stay here. For those who haven't heard of WREN before, we are a global network led by women, and we currently have representatives in Australia, Brazil, Indonesia, and Malaysia, and a lot of our roots were founded at the University of Wollongong as well. We provide a platform to foster collaboration, to equip early mid-career researchers and high-degree research students with the tools to thrive in their career pathways, to discuss the challenging topics like this event today, and to share learning so that we can make a difference and progress towards gender equity. Collaborating on an international level, we gain an insight of how different countries operate. On one hand, we are fortunate in Australia, but we still have a long way to go to embrace diversity and inclusion. So I'm really pleased to see a mix of genders attending today because it involves the participation of all genders. Since last year, we have been fortunate to be part of the Learn, Ignite, Flourish and Transform project, or we call it LIFT, and that's led by UAW and iAccelerate. And with the support, we have been able to continue delivering workshops and driving more conversations to see a greater attraction and retention of women in STEM. So thank you to Tam, Danielle, Georgia as well, for having us be part of this team, this very big multidisciplinary team as well, and to the federal government support through the Women in STEM and Entrepreneurship initiative. Lastly, I want to express my deep gratitude and appreciation to my fellow committee members who volunteered their time to make WREN successful. So we started in 2021 and we had a great amount to learn as we went along. And I can honestly say we're at a stage of really starting to look like a well-oiled machine. So if you see any of us in the black polo tops with our WREN logo, you know, feel free to go up to any of us if you want to learn more about what we do. So that's it. I'll wrap it up and I'll pass it on to Danielle, who will say a few words about the LIFT project.
Thanks, Emily. So the LIFT program that we've put together is all about growing our numbers of women in STEM. And when we talk about growing numbers, what we want is for women to feel really safe and welcome, because it hasn't always been that way in the past. So we're trying to make this really supportive environment. We literally have a cast of thousands, including WREN, Georgia, a lot of the people here today, groups from all across the uni helping us to run this program. And we're really grateful to the government. We received $1 million of WISE funding to support us, a lot of which goes into funding internships and paying for those internships. We're really grateful to ANSTO as our major industry partner, who've also contributed cash into this program, and a wide number of industry partners that we have all across Illawarra, with several over in iAccelerate as well. So, and we're really keen to build and connect with more industry partners as well. So what's the program about? It encompasses teacher workshops in our 3D printing makerspace, and if anyone has not been to the makerspace, it's fantastic, and I was there earlier this week with my child as well. And we also have industry internships, as I mentioned, that we are able to pay for through this grant. That's for PhD students. We also do entrepreneurship training for people both inside UAW and outside, and really trying to target underrepresented groups, so that they get access to that fantastic training, which is delivered through iAccelerate, and Tam sitting here as the director of iAccelerate. We also have a leadership retreat, which is fantastic. This is brilliant for everyone to do this type of leadership training. Through the grant, we're able to offer it to a wide range of women in STEM, where we learn that really important act of reflective practice. So you get time to reflect about yourself, think about your values, carve out time for personal development, create your own strategy map, which is not just about where you want to be in your career, but where you want to be as a person, giving time for yourself and your family so that you don't burn out as well. A huge thank you to our program coordinator that you can't miss in the front row in bright pink, Georgia Watson, and to WREN, who are helping us to deliver the final part of our program, which is, we call it Transform. It's the T of LIFT, and it's all about this networking aspect, bringing people together, connecting them. Kate later might talk to us about support networks. We were mentioning that before, and WREN's helping us to do that. So this event today is all part of that. I'm really looking forward to this session. Thank you very much, Kate, for coming along. I'm really excited to hear your talk shortly. And also, again, thank you to WREN. This event is put on entirely by WREN. We're really happy to support it through the group. They are our amazing group of ECR women. It is really important for my generation, grey hair, to step back and give the limelight to our junior colleagues as well. And so we're really happy to have ECR network providing these events for everyone. So with that, I will finish, and thank you, and passing back to the MC.
Okay, we are honoured to welcome Kate. Kate Ramsey is the Managing Director and Lead Coach at A&D Leadership Consulting, offering coaching to leaders with a focus on supporting women. Starting her career in nursing, Kate later transitioned to become an equal opportunity consultant, providing seminars and programs to promote gender equality in workplaces. Kate's passion for empowering women led her to write a memoir and a book on achieving gender equality in Australian workplaces, reflecting on her extensive career and advocating for change. Please join me to welcome Kate. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Yemine, for your introduction. You've heard a little bit about my history now. And the fact that I'm going to be talking today about my book, A Hell of a Lot of Glass, Achieving Gender Equality in the Workplaces of Australia. I'm going to tell you why I wrote the book, how I went about it, and then I will cover some of the key topic areas from the chapters. Emily and I have consulted via mainly email, and we've agreed on the areas that she felt were of most relevant to this group. And I will pepper that with some statistics and some stories to bring the whole thing alive. And thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the invitation, Emily. I'm really thrilled to be here. I don't think I've been to Wollongong before, and I'm loving it. It's a beautiful city, really beautiful. Okay, the first thing I want to do is explain the title, A Hell of a Lot of Glass. It's got a very striking cover that looks like it's a smashing glass, I think, thanks to a very good design person. It's a direct quote that you will see up there by Julia Gillard in a book she co-authored in 2020 called Women and Leadership. And she told her readers then, and I'm afraid it still applies, there's not just glass ceilings still providing barriers to women, there are glass cliffs and glass labyrinths. The cliffs is when a woman gets appointed as a CEO for the first time and inherits a mess. Qantas, late last year, comes to mind to me as an example of that. She's got a tough job there, and I think she's doing well. Glass labyrinth, you all know what a labyrinth's like. You know, it's the long way to the goal rather than the straight ahead way to the goal. And although often these things are invisible, they're still there and they still provide barriers. As sometimes the women see their male colleagues, I know it's not easy for any of us, but you know, they don't get the rough path or the glass labyrinth. My research revealed another kind of glass analogy, and that's double glazed ceilings, double glazing. and that's for women and men of a non-English speaking background, women of colour, Indigenous women, women with a disability, women of LGBTQI+ communities. And let me say again, men from those groups do hit that disadvantage as well. So I read the book, and when I got to that bit, yes, that is a hell of a lot of glass, I went, there's the title for my book. I love it. Of course, I had to pay for the the opportunity from her publishers charged me roundly, and with the condition I send a book for her. So I haven't heard from her, but I rather hope she might have read it. But there's the full quote, and I love the end bit there. You know, even when they shatter the glass, they're messed with jagged, dangerous shards to negotiate and deal with. All right, why did I write it? Well, you've heard from my bio, over 35 years working with the passion of supporting and empowering women. It's been driven for all sorts of reasons that I explain in the book. First as an equal opportunity consultant, then in leadership coaching, and more recently I do some pro bono mentoring as well. So I've seen a lot, I've heard a lot. I decided this is my contribution to, I think it's time. We're going to get there, truly achieving gender equality in the workplaces of Australia to the benefit of everyone, each woman, each man, and every single organisation. This is my contribution to that dialogue. Why do we need to break down barriers for women? Well, this is a quote from the book from me. The number of women I've seen walk away because they hit one lot of glass too many, and that's a cost to organisations. It's as well as it being really hard on that particular woman. And when I was thinking of some examples, and I coached a woman at a university for a number of years in my Northern Rivers region, and she was in an acting head of school role, and was ready to put her hand up, you know, for the substantive role, and they brought in an external person and bumped her sideways. So she left. She now runs a small business employing 18 people in our region and doing brilliantly. That university's loss, and the thing I think about, I've got much more corporate experience than university experience, but everyone who's been through the ranks in an organisation has had a fair few dollars paid on them for professional development. When women go out into their own small businesses, they take all that learning with them and all that investment money that's lost by the organisation. So that's one reason why. The cost of gender inequality, I was gobsmacked with this number, $128 billion. This comes from a report that was submitted to the Albanese government in October last year, and that organisation is called the Women's Economic Task Force. And that task force is chaired by Sam Mostyn, who you might have just heard a week or so ago is about to become our next female Governor General, Sam Mostyn. But she's an economist, and the team of people that had the brief to talk about to the Albanese government what can be done more. This was one of the stats. It's costing $128 billion. That doesn't make good sense, does it? Now, here's the positive end. The Workplace Gender Equality Agency commissioned this piece of research to academics from Bankwest Curtin Economics Centre, did their number crunching and research, and found that putting women into key leadership roles added market value of between $52 million and $70 million a year. That's a pretty compelling argument, isn't it, versus the cost of $148 million. And how did that happen? Why are they saying it will create that added benefit to business and universities, etc.? Well, it's about the differing leadership style of women. And my business is called And to support an and both. It's not an either or. There is a model of leadership at the moment, but it's primarily male-driven. When women are added to the mix and there's a complement of genders, things like, they found in their research that women tend to be more democratic, more collaborative, have a greater sense of corporate responsibility. As well, they found that women are less likely to participate in fraudulent behaviour. That's what they found, so who knows? Yeah. So it makes good business sense, and it makes no sense at all to create barriers to people being the best that they can be. It's not moving. Ah, there we are. Oh, I missed one. I missed my favourite. Look at this. Hey. At this moment, where is Jing Jing? Here she is. You've got a very, very creative tech person in your midst. I sent these boring old PowerPoints and Jing Jing brought them alive. And I've never heard that before. Grab them by the patriarchy. I want to know, is that a cat or a tiger? Whatever. How did we get here? This is not a binary argument. This is not now men are bad and women are good. This is much more deep and complicated because this is coming from the patriarchy. Thousands of years of conditioning of what men can do and what women can do, what women can look like, what men are supposed to look like, etc., etc. So it's deeply, deeply ingrained in all of us. And in my research, I forgot to say at the beginning, I interviewed about, as well as my own experiences and my thorough research, I interviewed about 25 people, mainly women, to find out about their career experiences, but some men as well. And that confirmed to me that the patriarchy can be tough on men too. It's not working well for any of us, and the sooner we get rid of it, the better. And that's a quote from a book that I have quoted in my own book quite extensively, written by Robert Jensen. He's an academic in the US, called The End of Patriarchy, and as you see there, he says it's a system, where am I? No, it's a system of social structures and practices in which men dominate, oppress and exploit women. It's taken several thousand years to embed institutionalised male dominance. This has come to define virtually all our interactions within the family and between humans and the larger world. These are the STEM stats that I found. And again, Jingling brought them alive with nice little diagrams. Women in STEM, the Office of Australia's Chief Scientist, that's where these stats came from. And you'll see, and they are a little bit old, 2016. You've probably got more relevant ones, and I wish I'd asked for yours. But at that stage, you can see male versus female, 71 to 29%, born overseas, full-time workers and salaries. It's unequal, and I'm assuming those stats won't have changed hugely. Am I correct with that? Yep, okay. So that's just to paint a bit of the picture. And then we've got grab them by their patriarchy. And here's Gillard, and I love this image. My favourite season is the fall of the patriarchy. And this is a Gillard quote that we've got here. We can only eradicate the gender bias in politics and leadership generally if it's identified, discussed, studied and challenged, evidence-based change. So I'm going to talk about quotas in a little minute, but that's what Gillard's saying. Now, how to do this? Well, as you'll hear when I read out the second to last page in my book, the whole responsibility of this change lies with leaders. But it's just not any old leader, it's the leadership style that's used that is important. And in the leadership world, we're talking now about adaptive leadership. Have any of you heard that term? Yeah, it's coming into currency, and it's versus what's being called technical leadership. And I thought I'd use the gender pay gap as an example of how a technical leader would respond to that challenge and an adaptive leader. You probably saw on the Tuesday before International Women's Day, that the Workplace Gender Equality Agency is now required to publish the gender pay gaps of its almost 5,000 reporting members and businesses. And that was pretty telling. 21.7% is the average overall gender pay gap in private sector businesses employing over 100 people, and there are almost 5,000 of them. So being shown up publicly is now going to happen every year. Now I thought of then, all right, so what would a technical leader do with that problem? A technical leader would delegate to their HR or people and culture people to trawl all of the policies and procedures in their organisation, eradicate any form of gender bias, and everything will be all right. An adaptive leader would start to make a mess. I love the one at the top. They'd get off the dance floor and talk to people, research, ask questions, brainstorm, analyse, experiment, try things out. Adaptive leadership is quite complex and quite messy. And you might create, as a leader, a whole lot of data before you narrow it down and say, I think we'll try these things out, and we'll set a goal, a target, a quota, if you will, and see how we go with that. And it was interesting. I gave an in-house talk on International Women's Day to an international tech consulting research business, and its gender pay gap was published that week, and it's still quite large. However, at the end of my presentation, the HR guy said to them, look, what you need to understand is the difference between equal pay for equal work and a gender pay gap. And here in this business, we definitely pay people equally in the same jobs. Where the gap is at the executive level. We don't have enough senior women. So there's that right there, they've identified the problem. Now they can set in place some plans about how they get more women up into the executive ranks who are paid the same as men, because they will be, because they do equal pay for equal work. And it's important to understand the difference between those two. So I thought that there's a practical example of how adaptive leadership works. Okay, another topic that I said to Emily I really wanted to include because it's a biggie, as I call it, the work-family juggling act. I'd like a show of hands. How many are jugglers here? How many are juggling work and family? Some men too? Yeah, of course. Okay. So it's big and it's hard when the little darlings come along, because you have conflicting priorities. And at both my IUWD presentations, they asked me to read this one out, so I am going to read it out again today. This is one of my interviewees. She's a lawyer. She's a senior counsel in an international finance business in the Australian business. And she says, she's got 2 little boys. Yes, I feel maternal guilt juggling work and family. Mostly it makes me feel frustrated if I'm spending time away from children and the things I'm doing do not feel important enough or worthwhile in comparison. I feel guilty because my children will be young for such a short time, and I could possibly have a bigger impact on their development by spending more time with them in these early years. But at the same time, I want to represent women as equals to them with our own interests and not purely in a nurturing role. And I feel that it's important that they see me work outside the home for this reason. And I love that two parts to that. If she's not doing work that's not very worthwhile and important, she feels really she's compromising time with her kids, but at the same time she wants to be a good positive role model to her 2 little boys, and that applies to our girls too. And work is still structured to suit people who can come in the morning and leave at the end of the day and not be worried about kids that are sick and school holidays and you all know, you know all of that. Added to that is the domestic arena. And this comes from this year's, the 2024, they're called annual Hilda reports, and they gather a massive amount of data. And this lot caught my eye, not surprisingly, that mothers of dependent children were still spending 75% more time on unpaid housework and childcare than their male partners. The mothers spent 53 hours, the partners 30. So we've got to sort that out too. I think we all need to learn very good negotiation skills. A little bit about power now. Power over versus power with. And for this quote, I need to explain the Miss Triggs moment. There used to be a literary and humorous magazine that was produced in the UK called Punch magazine. Anyone remember Punch? You're probably all, oh, you do, yeah. Most of us, yeah, there's a nodding head in the back too. I don't know, the rest of you are too young. But I used to do equal opportunity awareness seminars for managers and leaders. And I used to use the Miss Triggs moment as one of my slides, because it's got a boardroom and the chair is a man, they're all men, there's one woman. And the man says, "That's a very good suggestion, Miss Triggs. Perhaps one of the men could make it." Most of my workshops were for men, and they'd titter and think, no, it doesn't happen around here. Well, this is from one of my interviewees, who's a very senior leadership consultant in an international firm. And here she is saying, in meetings, when I'm often the only woman, this happens all the time. The men dominate, they interrupt and talk over me and repeat ideas that I've contributed that then get attributed to them. It's to do with their style of communication and has an indirect impact on me. I find it's hard to feel welcome and to contribute ideas. Anybody experienced a Miss Triggs moment? Yes. It sounds funny and it sounds pretty simple, but it isn't when your ideas get pinched and off they go. And I thought she spoke really, really well on that. Now that's an example of overt discrimination. I'm not mentioning legislation today, but what I just will mention, I have 3 contributing authors in my book. Chapter 3 is written by a lawyer who, on my request, has written an absolutely brilliant piece about the history and current state of affirmative action and anti-discrimination legislation in Australia. And it's complicated. Any people with some legal background here? Okay, chapter 3 is, you'll learn a lot. And just in summary, because of Australia being all those little colonies, and we all know best still, I grew up in Adelaide, we know best, you all know best, you know, what happened in Australia, our history. There's anti-discrimination law against race, gender, age, disability, etc., 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 and all the acts say things slightly differently, but they all make discrimination unlawful. But the problem is that for an issue to be identified, it needs someone to put their hand up and complain. And there's usually, almost always, a power imbalance in that situation. So most people do not put up their hand and complain. Rather, they stay quiet, they leave, because this isn't a safe place to be. And so anti-discrimination law wasn't working, which is where affirmative action law came from, which is about requiring managers and leaders to put in place change-based legislation. So that's what the law is about, but policies and practices and procedures is what I'm much more interested in, because that's where the change can happen. So there's overt discrimination, like the Miss Triggs moment. And also, I thought of another example. One of the people I've coached for a long time studied law, and she has a gender-neutral name. And when she was applying for to be recruited into one of the big professional services law firms, she was sitting in the waiting room ready for her interview, and the interviewer came in and called out, "Lindsay so-and-so," and she got up and walked towards him, and he said, no, I'm interviewing Lindsay so-and-so. "That is me," she said. "Oh, I've prepared these questions for a man." Now, folks, that won't happen now because of all that anti-discrimination law. But do you think if that bloke's still in the workforce, he's still got all that unconscious bias inside him that led him to assume that the person he wanted to recruit was going to answer to questions for men? That's the overt discrimination. What we're dealing with now is much more covert. And I've just used the phrase unconscious bias. I've got a whole chapter on unconscious bias. I call it the elephant in the room. And half the time we don't know we're carrying them until someone points them out to us. And my research has revealed another form of sexism that turns out to be covert discrimination, and it's being called benevolent sexism. Anybody heard of that? You have, yes. I hadn't until my daughter identified some for me, an example from some research, and I've written about it in the book. So benevolent sexism is about examples like a male boss choosing not to give a female team member a more challenging assignment because it might be a bit too difficult for her. Or a male boss not giving a woman the frank and fearless feedback she needs to improve and change because it might hurt her feelings. So here's someone with a good heart, but what's happening to her career when she's not given a challenging assignment and she's not given feedback? Someone tell me, what's happening to her career? It's, yeah. Well, at best it's like this. When the next role for promotion comes along, she's not competitive because she hasn't done that challenging assignment. She hasn't received the feedback and support for learning and change. And yet, you know, if you accuse that bloke of sex discrimination, he would probably be very upset. Inside him is a whole heap of unconscious biases that are getting in the way of him being able to be an effective leader to that young woman. So covert discrimination is really what we're dealing with much more in this day and age. The anti-discrimination laws tidied up the obvious stuff, and this makes it harder because you know, you have to get the data first. So that's Miss Triggs' moment, and here we are on benevolent sexism here. They're getting a pat on the back instead of challenging assignments and helpful feedback. I love that diagram too, thank you, Gingy. I'm going to talk about quotas now. It's a very thorny question. There's been great resistance to quotas in the field of equal opportunity for women. And of course it's understandable because both women and men would dislike a woman being put into a role she's not the best candidate for purely to fulfill a quota. It's very unfair on the woman because she won't, you know, she's not capable of the role, and it's very unfair on male applicants who missed out. So there's no point in doing that. Unfortunately, quotas, the word has been given a bad name, and it's always linked with affirmative action in unfair ways. And that is not what it's about. What it is about is providing catch-up measures so that people can be competitive. I like to talk about the starting line of a running race. If a woman's had 2 lots of maternity leave and she's missed out on a lot of IT training, and the job comes up. An affirmative action measure for her, this is the starting line, she's back here. She needs some tech training, some IT training, and then she's competitive at the start of the race. When the gun goes off, it's still a fair race, and the winner is the best applicant on merit. And please keep that in your head. But perhaps because that word has got so much bad press, we call them targets or goals or whatever. Okay, so why do we need these? Because we need measures, as Gillard has said, and I've previously quoted. And here's the picture that I got painted in, what year is this one? Let me just have a look. Department of Prime Minister of Cabinet, March 23. These were the stats that came out then. So we've still got a long way to go. 22.3% of CEOs are women. I don't know if you've heard say, but there's apparently more men called Peter who are CEOs in the ASX companies than there are women. So, change is still needed. 35.1% of key management positions, 34% of board members and 18% of women chairing boards. Now, that's quite a good stat, I think, and the reason for that is this is one of my interviewees who has been a CEO and is now a non-executive member of several high-powered boards. And I interviewed her, and she wasn't mucking around. She said the makeup of boards has only changed because of a lot of the investor groups have said they don't want boards that all look the same. And that's the issue. We need diversity. And suddenly everyone could find women for these boards. That's in her experience, including her. Also, the naming and shaming of the stock exchange companies. They require a yearly report, and they make a noise with the companies that aren't behaving. She also said, I'm sick of this, it's too slow, I've shifted my language. We set hard targets for everything else, for sales, for investor relations. I'm sure you all have hard targets for things in your world. For everything except equality. So why, when we all say people are our greatest asset, do we not set hard targets around that? And I agree with her. The next area is about the importance of support. I was talking about the trip to Antarctica with these two. Yeah, fabulous. What was it, 100 women in a boat? Antarctica. Yeah, it's lonely on your own, and there are still places where women are in a real minority. It's lonely challenging the status quo. We need support, we women and men need support too, and we need a range of different types of support. And Gillard and Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala in their book have written about this. By the way, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is Nigerian. She was a politician in Nigeria, and she's now the Director General of the World Trade Organization, the first woman and the first person of colour as well. So she's a heavy hitter, and they wrote this book together. They talk about role models, anyone who is looked up to and whose character traits and achievements are admired. So I'd encourage you, younger women, to have a look. Where are your high-achieving women? What are they doing? Find out how they got to where they've got, the obstacles they overcome and how they went about that. You may never meet a role model. You can admire them from afar. But if you have the luck to meet them as well, all the better, because you can ask them questions and pick their brains. Thank you. Next, mentors. And that's a person more senior in your organisation and or network who you can sit down with and actually pick their brains. And they can tell you things and help you to navigate the labyrinth, etc. Then there are sponsors that they write about. And sponsors are a more influential person who can often open doors and navigate the way for people. I also add to that list leadership coaches, because that's what I do, and that's a person outside the organisation who has no investment in the decisions you make, but will support you, help you to clarify your vision, values and purpose, and help you to look at the barriers that might get in the way to you achieving that and support you as you go about achieving that. And then there's your own network of support. Finding some like souls, some buddies, where you can, just shoot the breeze from time to time. And we're going to do some networking afterwards, and make sure you do it and enjoy it. So what to do about all of this? Here's a big long list. Are some of you in leadership roles here? Yep, okay. I'm not going to read them all out, but really the top sentence is the key summary. Embrace the value of a gender-diverse workforce for both economic and equity reasons and take a stand to achieve this. And family-friendly workplaces have things like available, affordable childcare. They have job sharing. They have equal pay. They make it attractive for men to take up paternity leave as well as maternity leave. So there is a great big long list there of things you can follow. And I hope you can get access to these slides if you want them. I like the last one. It's old-fashioned. It's not only just getting off the dance floor like we saw before, but management by walking around. Walk around and talk and find out what are the issues, what is going on for people, for those of you in leadership roles. And for women, especially younger women, I've said here. I will read these out. Negotiate your salary. If you find this too hard to do, get some coaching to help you prepare yourself. A quick one, I had a woman I coached for years. She entry point, middle management HR role, and a bloke started at the same time, almost parallel. They both climbed the ladder and they were at very senior levels when she discovered he was being paid heaps more than her because he negotiated on entry. And every time they had a bonus and a pay increase, he was in front and she didn't know. We've got to stop sitting and being grateful, women. We have to learn to negotiate and, ask the tough question. Search out supportive men and women and ask them where possible to sponsor you. If you are interrupted in meetings, ask the chair or a supportive leader to help ensure that you get heard. Don't tolerate sexism or misogyny, including benevolent sexism. Be prepared to call it out and know where to get support. If you're not aware of any increased opportunities for women in your organisation, ask why not or change employers. Never volunteer to set up the room, take the minutes or get the coffee. If you're asked to get the coffee, suggest it's someone else's turn today. And differentiate yourself in some way. Example, adopt a style of dress that is professional rather than blending in with the way the men dress. In the corporate sector, you'll see women all dressed in pantsuits in black and grey and white shirts. Differentiate, be your wonderful selves. I would like to conclude by reading two little tiny sections from my book, and then I'll be handing back. In the last chapter of my book, I say on page 274, I can summarise in 3 words what's needed in Australia for sustainable change in the status of women at work. Leadership, and finish the sentence, leadership, correct. Attitudinal change is needed so that all leaders truly embrace the value of a diverse workforce. Systemic change is needed so that all barriers to women's progression are removed. And cultural change is needed so that all remnants of the influence of patriarchy are eliminated. Attitudinal, systemic and cultural change. It'll all be done before we know it. And lastly, to women on my last page, I hope that this book will inform younger women about where we women have come from and will motivate them to continue to demand equality for themselves and for other women. My optimistic hope is also that they will not be doing this alone because the leaders in this land, both men and women, will hear their demands and your demands. Thank you very much.